Today in the bunker, we're going to scratch build a mobile home suitable for the wasteland. A few months back, Creatures, Caverns, and Crafting, and that's a wonderful channel you should be watching, did a build with the trailer park, the Plasticville O-scale trailer park. And these are really a great set, a lot of potential in there. Instead of just doing my box of trailers just the way he did, let's take it a little farther and scratch build one using these as a template. The parts are fairly basic. Got the main frame of the trailer. Got our two side walls. Got a roof. Got a vent that goes on the roof. All of our windows, a front and a back wall, and a shade awning, which when I do these stick out a little farther than I care for, so I'm going to cut these back probably about a third of the way off, and then attach it. There goes my desk. Plus some stairs. So we're going to use some foam core, and you could use foam core, you could use cardboard, you could use chipboard for a lot of this, but I'm going to use a chunk of foam core and see what we can do. So we'll use these pieces as a template and see what we can make. The floor, I just laid that down and drew around it. There's some rough measurements in case you want to build this the same size I'm building it, but definitely make sure that it scales with the miniatures that you're going to use. If you're using like old school, more 25 millimeter, this may be, well, it's probably about the right size anyway. So just make sure it scales with what you're doing, and I'm going to do the walls and everything, and I'll show you these sizes in case you want to copy that down. And there's our other parts traced out. There's the wall. Remember, I did these from the inside, kind of, because I laid these with the face down. But I don't know that it makes a whole lot of difference. But in any case, the two walls, the long walls, the only difference is the placement of your windows. And you can kind of freeform that. There's no set thing. Same thing with the end pieces. Generally, the back one has a smaller window than the front. But not always. You can kind of do it however you want to do it. And then the roof is just big enough. I would say just cut out the other pieces and assemble them, and then see how big of a roof you actually need. This has a lip on it, so it made this a little large all the way around, so we'll trim that down as we go. So I'm going to cut these out and we'll get ready to put it together. Now when I cut these out, I cut to the inside of these lines, and then when I do the windows, I'm going to cut to the outside, just to kind of make the sizes match up. Again, not tremendously important. If it's off a couple of millimeters, not a big deal. So I'm just using a metal straight edge and a decent utility knife, and just make 2 or 3 passes. Make yourself a nice clean cut. Try to keep it straight. One thing to note on your cuts for the windows, if they're not the neatest, that's fine. We're going to dress that up as we proceed. So try to be as neat as you can. If it gets a little out of whack, not a problem. Another note on these windows, instead of cutting them out individually, you could make just applique pieces to go on there. Especially if they're boarded up or whatever, it will be a lot easier than cutting them all out. So if that is something that would be easier, by all means do that. Another variation you can do is what I'm going to do with these. The cuts are so much neater on the side that I made them on. I'm going to make that the outside instead of the inside. So this will be kind of mirror imaged from the other trailers, which is fine. You'd actually want to do several of those to just kind of mix it up a little bit. So we'll get ready with some hot glue and start trying to get this together. Also, I narrowed the end pieces down. I cut about 1 millimeter off just to make it fit inside the frame. So don't take my measurements as the gospel. The first piece that I added was one that I hadn't originally cut out. I just cut a piece to go over basically the tongue of the trailer, and we'll dress that up a little bit later, but just to add that to make it easier to get everything square. And once you get it squared up and assembled, then you can start to see, where you went wrong, like I did. This wall is a little bit taller than that one, but not a huge deal. Once we get the roof on there, A, you're not really going to notice, and B, it's for the Wasteland, so it doesn't really matter. Stuff's going to sag and get broken and all those good things, so we'll just carry on. The base model that we're kind of using as a template has wheels. I guess they don't have an uncle to come help them take the wheels off. I don't know. But anyway, we're going to put some underpinning on there, so I've just put some kind of feet on there to kind of stabilize it and put that skirting around the edge, and then we'll put some probably corrugated pieces on there to kind of dress that up a little bit, or who knows, we'll think of something. Also, we've got the roof. I trimmed it back a little bit to fit better. I just took some offcuts and glued them in place to hold that where it needs to be. So what we're going to do now is dress up these window openings and figure out that underpinning, and then we'll start getting ready to prime this. To dress up the window cutouts and the door cutouts that we made, I've just gone and I've taken some coffee stir sticks, and I just use little PVA, and I glue them, cut them to fit, and glue them in place to make a frame around there. And even if you don't do anything else, that really sells the idea that that's a window or a door and not just a void in the wall. It takes a little bit of time, it's a little bit fiddly, but it's well worth the effort. Once you're done, you can paint those separately than the rest of the wall and really define a window or a door. I've added the underpinning. I just took some corrugated paper and made it go vertically, and then I used the same corrugated paper and just put some strips on there horizontally, just as kind of a decorative thing, kind of like how these have on them. Whoops, I guess maybe if you could see it. That sort of decorated corrugated bit at the bottom. Also, I've taken everywhere that there is exposed foam core, I just smeared on a thin layer of PVA. We're going to let that dry. And we're going to take some cardstock and cover up the tongue part of that. And then once that's dry, we'll be ready to prime. Another bit that I've added, I took some more of that drink carton and cut it to about a 4 or 5 millimeter width, just to cover the edge of that foam core and kind of dress that up a little bit, covered up that tongue of the trailer. So, and then added a portion to that large window. I just took a piece of wood square dowel, put in there. All that's optional, but it just helps dress it up a little bit. I'm probably going to scratch build a door to put in there before we prime it, just so that we can prime it all at once. After the primer dried, I built up some rust as a base layer. Started with, I had primed it in a dark brown, touched it up with dark brown, then went to a nutmeg color, and then from there went to raw sienna and just put that on with a sponge. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that's how I prefer to do rust. It gives it a texture. It's not the only way to do it, but it's the way I generally find works pretty well. So we're going to let that dry. The roof part I hit with, I primed it with black and then put on a paint called hammered metal, but you could use any kind of silver. This just kind of has a weathered appearance right out of the can. And then I put some rust effect on top of that. So we're going to let that dry a bit, and then we will go ahead and start applying some actual color. And I should point out, the windows I dressed up with some coffee stirrers, which is the same stuff I used to frame the windows in. I just cut planks. I used some drywall tape. You could use mosquito mesh or whatever. And put that on there and just glued those on just to kind of cover up the windows, give it kind of a post-apoc look. So we're going to let all that dry and then we'll start painting. For the main color, I'm just applying some white with a sponge, just to the trim and the sides, just to give it that sort of aged peeling paint look. And again, I'm just taking a sponge and just putting it on. And there again, that's to taste. You could just brush paint this or spray paint it a solid color and then add just a tiny bit of rust or no rust if you wanted it to look really new. So just do that and until you're happy with it. It occurred to me that the occupants of the trailer needed a way to get in. So I took some scrap foam and just made a set of stairs that fit there. So once that PVA sets up, we'll go ahead and get that painted and get it ready to put with the trailer. And while we're waiting for that to dry, the way I did the wood, I started out with a very dark brown, dry brushed or kind of over brushed with a dark gray, and then dry brushed it with a maple sugar tan, but any kind of yellowy tan color will work. It just helps bring out the wood grain and it gives it a very aged look. That's not the only way to do it, but that's generally how I do it, and it works pretty well. And there's our scratch-built mobile home suitable for the wasteland or any post-apocalyptic scenario. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you like this kind of content, be sure to like and subscribe, and I hope you have a fantastic day.